My mother's voice was cold as steel when she delivered the sentence. She admitted she knew I had paid off the $680,000 mortgage, yet they were gifting the house to my brother as a graduation present. Before I could process the theft of my life's savings, she added that I should not come to the party because I would ruin the mood. Just like that, 5 years of sacrifice were erased. My name is Savannah Blake, and until 3:45 this afternoon, I operated under the delusion that I was a valued member of my family. I was sitting at my desk at Northbridge Metrics, the dual monitors humming with the comforting, predictable logic of financial data. I am a senior analyst. My job is to look at chaotic numbers and find the truth buried beneath them. I make sense of things. That is who I am, or at least, that is who I thought I was before my phone vibrated against the mahogany veneer of my desk, displaying the name Mom. I remember looking at the time. It was Friday. The quarterly reports were due in 2 hours. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but the conditioned reflex of a dutiful daughter is a hard habit to break. I picked up. "Savannah, honey," my mother's voice chirped, light and airy, the tone she used when she was performing the role of the perfect suburban matriarch. "Do you have a minute? Your father and I have come to a decision." I typed a final command into my spreadsheet and leaned back in my ergonomic chair. "Hey, Mom, sure. Is everything okay? Is Dad okay?" "Oh, Michael is fine. He is right here," she said. I could hear the faint rustle of a newspaper in the background, the soundtrack of my father's passive existence. "We have been talking about the house, the Cedar Harbor house." My stomach tightened. That house was not just wood and siding to me. It was the physical manifestation of every overtime hour I had worked since I was 22. It was the reason I drove a 6-year-old sedan and lived in a rented apartment that smelled faintly of the previous tenant's cat. "What about it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Well," she began, and I could hear the smile in her voice, the self-congratulatory tone of someone about to bestow a great favor. "We know you have paid off the $680,000 mortgage. We know that, Savannah, and we appreciate it. Really, we do." She paused. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with a but that I could feel pressing against my eardrum. "But," she continued, her voice hardening just a fraction, turning into that cold steel I knew so well. "We have decided to gift the house to your brother. We are going to sign the deed over to Logan next week. Consider it a graduation present." The air left the room. For a moment, I thought I had misheard. I thought perhaps the connection had garbled, or my brain, fried from 8 hours of data analysis, was hallucinating. "Excuse me?" I whispered. "You are gifting the house to Logan?" "He is graduating, Savannah," she said, as if that explained everything, as if a bachelor's degree in communications was equal to the $680,000 I had poured into that property. "He needs a head start. The market is tough right now. You have your career, you are established, you have always been the one who can take care of herself. Logan, well, he needs this foundation." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Mom, I paid for that house. I paid every single cent of the mortgage for 5 years. We had an agreement." "We never wrote anything down, Savannah," she cut in sharply. "And besides, it is family money. It stays in the family. We are just allocating it where it is needed most. You should be happy for him. He is your brother." My throat felt dry, like I had swallowed a handful of sand. The betrayal was not just about the money. It was the casual dismissal of my existence. It was the confirmation of what I had always suspected but never wanted to admit. I was the resource, and Logan was the investment. Then came the second blow, the one that truly knocked the wind out of me. "With that in mind," she said, her tone breezy again, "I think it is best if you do not come to the graduation party at the lake house this weekend." I blinked, staring at the cursor blinking on my screen. "You do not want me at the party?" "We do not want anyone ruining the mood," she said. "You know how you get about money. You get so serious. This party is for people who are truly, genuinely happy for Logan. We want a positive atmosphere. Just send a card, maybe a gift card for furniture. He will need to furnish the place. She was asking me to buy furniture for the house I had bought for them. The sheer audacity of it struck me dumb. I felt like I was 5 years of age again, standing in the kitchen, watching Logan get the last slice of cake because he is growing, while I was told I had already had enough. "I see," I managed to say. My voice sounded strange, detached, like it belonged to someone else. "So, the house is Logan's, and I am not welcome." "Do not be dramatic, Savannah," she sighed. "We are just doing what is best for the family. You are a part of the family, so this is best for you too. You understand, right?" I closed my eyes. I could see the spreadsheet in front of me, the columns of debts and credits, the absolute binary nature of math. There was no column for mother's narcissism. There was no formula for golden child syndrome. "Okay," I said. "I understand." "Good girl," she said. "I knew you would be reasonable. I have to go. The caterers are calling. Bye, honey." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time. The office around me was alive with the Friday afternoon buzz. 2 colleagues near the water cooler were laughing about a fantasy football draft. The printer in the corner was rhythmically churning out paper. The world was spinning forward, completely indifferent to the fact that my life had just been hollowed out. 5 years. I calculated it instantly. 60 months, 260 weeks, thousands of hours of sleep lost. I had skipped vacations. I had dated men I did not like because they enjoyed cheap dates like hiking, saving me money on dinners. I had worn my coats until the lining shredded. I had done all of it to save that house in Cedar Harbor, to keep my parents from foreclosure, believing that I was saving my inheritance, saving my home. "What have I let them do to me?" I whispered to the empty air. The question repeated in my head, a broken loop. What have I let them do? I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, but my movements were mechanical. I saved my work. I locked my computer. I picked up my purse. I walked out of the analyst pen, past the glass-walled conference rooms where people were discussing synergies and quarterly targets. None of it felt real. It felt like a set, and the actors were all bad, and the script made no sense. I took the elevator down to the parking garage. The silence of the concrete structure was heavy, broken only by the distant echo of a car door slamming. I walked to my car, a reliable, unglamorous sedan that I had kept running purely out of fiscal discipline. I got in and shut the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the first real thing I had heard since the phone call. I gripped the steering wheel. I squeezed it until the leather bit into my palms, until the pain was a sharp, grounding focus. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just breathed, in and out, trying to expand a chest that felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. In my mind, I saw the house. It was a beautiful thing. That house in Cedar Harbor, 2 stories, white siding, a porch that wrapped around the front like a welcoming arm. It sat on a quiet street where the trees formed a canopy in the summer. It was the only stability I had ever known, and I had fought for it. I had fought the bank. I had fought the interest rates. I had fought my own desires for a comfortable life to keep that roof over their heads. And now, Caroline Blake, my mother, the martyr, the hero of her own meticulously curated life story, was handing it to Logan. Logan, my brother, 4 years younger, the boy who had never worked a summer job because he needed to focus on his travel baseball team, the boy who had crashed 3 cars, all of which were quietly replaced by my parents while I was paying for my own oil changes. Logan, who was graduating with a degree that took him 6 years to earn, was getting a $680,000 house as a head start. My father, Michael, would have stood there nodding, probably looking at his shoes. He was a good man in the way a ghost is a good tenant. He didn't make noise, but he didn't pay rent either. He avoided conflict like it was a contagion. If Caroline said the sky was green, Michael would admire the shade of emerald. I looked at my phone sitting in the cup holder. I could drive to Cedar Harbor right now. It was a 3-hour drive. I could storm in and scream. I could throw the furniture. I could burn the place down. But I was a data analyst. I did not act on impulse. I acted on evidence. There was only one person in my family who knew the truth. One person who knew that the miracle of the family finances wasn't Caroline's catering business or Michael's hard work at the garage. I pulled up my messages and found the contact. Uncle Marcus. Marcus Hale. My father's younger brother, the black sheep, mostly because he refused to participate in the collective delusion that was the Blake family dynamic. He was the one who had sat me down when I was 16 and taught me how to balance a checkbook. He was the one who told me, "Love is a feeling, Savannah, but a contract is a fact." I typed the message, my thumbs moving with cold precision. Uncle Marcus, they just told me. They are gifting the house to Logan for graduation. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, watching the little delivery receipt appear. I waited. The fluorescent light of the parking garage hummed overhead, a sickly yellow buzz. 3 minutes later, the phone buzzed. "Meet us at the lake house this weekend. Go to the family cookout first, before the big party. But listen to me. Savannah, this time, do not stay silent." I read the text twice. Do not stay silent. A strange sensation washed over me. It was not relief. It was something colder, sharper. It felt like the click of a weapon being loaded. I started the car. The engine rumbled to life. I was not going to the party to celebrate. I was not going to the party to ruin the mood. I was going to the party to introduce my family to a stranger, the Savannah Blake who had kept the receipts. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the spot. The rear-view mirror framed my eyes. They looked tired, yes, but they also looked clear. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't wondering how I was going to pay for everyone else's happiness. I was wondering how much their happiness was going to cost them when the bill finally came due. I drove out of the garage and into the blinding afternoon sun of Maple Ridge, turning my wheels east, toward Ohio, toward Cedar Harbor, toward the truth. The hum of the tires against the asphalt on the drive toward Ohio was a hypnotic rhythm, one that peeled back the layers of time until I was no longer a 29-year-old analyst, but a child standing on the porch of the house in Cedar Harbor. To the outside world, that house was the definition of the American dream. It sat on a street named Elmwood Drive, though the elms had long since succumbed to disease and been replaced by sturdy oaks. Our lot was anchored by a massive, ancient maple tree in the backyard, its roots creating an uneven terrain that we learned to navigate without looking. There was a white picket fence, literal and cliché, that my father painted every 2 summers. If you drove past slowly, you would see a family that looked like they had been cut out of a catalog. You would see the successful mother, the hardworking father, and the 2 children playing in the yard. But inside, the architecture of our family was built on a foundation of silent, grinding inequality. My mother, Caroline, was the architect. She ran a catering company called Harborline Events. To the town of Cedar Harbor, she was the woman who made weddings magical and retirement parties memorable. She was a whirlwind of energy, always smelling of vanilla extract and sanitizer, but within the 4 walls of our home, her business was the primary antagonist of our lives. It was always the busy season, or she was reinvesting for the future, or she was carrying the weight of this family on her back. She loved that narrative. She wore her martyrdom like a designer coat. "I sacrifice everything for you kids," she would say, usually while scraping leftovers from a client's wedding into Tupperware for our dinner. "I work myself to the bone so you can have a good life." The problem was that the definition of "you kids" was remarkably selective. My father, Michael, was a ghost in his own life. He worked at a small garage near the edge of town, fixing radiators and changing brake pads. He came home with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands. He was a kind man, in a vague, distant way, but he was pathologically afraid of upsetting my mother. His default state was agreement. If Caroline said we could not afford something, Michael nodded. If Caroline said Logan needed something, Michael opened his wallet. He was not a villain, but his passivity made him an accomplice. And then there was Logan. My brother was born 4 years after me, And from the moment he arrived, the gravitational pull of the household shifted. Logan was the sun, and the rest of us were just planets hoping to stay in orbit. It started with small things. When school began in September, I would be told that my backpack from last year was perfectly fine, that it had character. I would scrub the canvas with soap and water, trying to fade the ink stains. A week later, Logan would march into kindergarten with a brand new bag, featuring whatever superhero was popular that year, complete with the matching lunchbox. "He is little, Savannah," my mother would say, dismissing my stare. "He gets excited. You are older, you are strong, you understand the value of taking care of things. You are strong." That was the currency they paid me in, while Logan was paid in new cleats, baseball camps, and private math tutors when his grades slipped. I was paid in compliments about my resilience. I remember one specific Tuesday in late October when I was 14 years of age. I had been chosen for a gifted student field trip to the state capitol. It was an honor. The cost was $150, which covered the bus, the hotel for one night, and the meals. I waited until after dinner, when the kitchen was clean and my mother was going over her invoices at the dining table. My father was watching television in the den. "Mom," I said, placing the permission slip on the table, "I need you to sign this, and I need a check for the trip." She did not even look up from her calculator. "Not this week, Savannah. Harborline had a cancellation. Cash flow is tight. We are bleeding money right now." "But it is due by Friday," I said, panic rising in my chest. "If I do not pay, I lose my spot. It is for the advanced civics program." She finally looked at me, taking off her reading glasses. Her eyes were tired, but there was that familiar edge of irritation, as if my request was a personal attack on her efforts. I said no. "Savannah, do you think money grows on that maple tree out back? You are smart. You can read about the Capitol in a book. We have to prioritize." I swallowed the lump in my throat. I took the permission slip back. I did not argue. I had learned by then that arguing with Caroline Blake was like wrestling with smoke. You just ended up exhausted and empty-handed. I stayed home while my class went. I told my teacher I had the flu. 6 days later, on a Monday, Logan came home from school complaining that his gym shoes were uncool because they didn't have the air pump feature that all the other boys had. That evening, we went to the mall. I watched, standing by the entrance of the shoe store, as my mother pulled out the credit card, the same card that was bleeding less than a week ago, and bought him a pair of high-top sneakers that cost $120. "He needs to fit in, Savannah," she told me later in the car, catching my reflection in the rearview mirror. "Boys are cruel. Self-esteem is fragile at that age. Besides, it is an investment in his confidence." I looked out the window, watching the suburban streetlights flicker past. I realized then that tight funds was not a mathematical reality. It was a choice. There was always money for Logan's confidence. There was never money for my opportunities. By the time I turned 16, I stopped asking. I got a job at Miller's Market, bagging groceries and stocking shelves. I worked Tuesday and Thursday nights and double shifts on weekends. My apron always smelled like onions and cardboard. When I got my first paycheck, I felt a surge of power that was almost intoxicating. It was $300, and it was mine. Or so I thought. "Since you are working now," my mother said casually the following week, "you can cover your own car insurance and maybe pick up your own toiletries. It is good practice for the real world." So I did. I paid for my insurance. I bought my own shampoo. I saved for my own clothes. When it came time for college, the conversation was brief. "Logan will need tuition for a university," my dad said, looking at the floor. "We have to save for that. Well, there is that community college in the next town. It is very sensible, and you can keep working at the market." I went to community college. I transferred to a state school 2 years later. Paying every semester with loans I took out in my own name and cash, I earned working over 40 hours a week. I graduated with honors. My parents came to the ceremony, took a few photos, and then left early because Logan had a Little League game. Through all of this, there was one person who watched. My Uncle Marcus. Marcus Hale was my father's younger brother, but he seemed to belong to a different species entirely. He was a bachelor who lived in a tidy townhouse on the other side of the lake. He worked in forensic accounting, a job my mother referred to as boring bean counting, but which Marcus loved. He would come over for Sunday dinners, sitting quietly while my mother regaled the table with stories of her business heroics, and Logan interrupted with loud tales of his video game conquests. Marcus would listen, but his eyes would drift to me, washing dishes in the kitchen while everyone else ate dessert. One rainy afternoon, when I was 17, Marcus found me on the back porch. I was trying to study for a calculus exam, shivering slightly in a sweater that had holes in the elbows because I was saving my money for a car repair. He sat down on the swing next to me. He didn't offer pity. Marcus didn't believe in pity. You are learning a hard lesson earlier than most people, he said. His voice was gravelly and low. What lesson is that? I asked, not looking up from my textbook. That love is not always distributed equally, he said, and that unfairness is the only thing you can count on in this house. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a book. It wasn't a novel. It was a primer on personal finance and contract law. Read this, he said. Your mother tells stories. Savannah. She builds worlds with her words where she is the queen and everyone else is a subject. Your father lives in those stories because it is easier than fighting them. But stories crumble. Numbers do not. He tapped the cover of the book. Paperwork is the final voice. If it is not written down, it does not exist. If you do not have a receipt, you did not buy it. If your name is not on the deed, you do not own it. Learn to speak the language of paper, and you will never be at their mercy. I took the book. I read it cover to cover that week. Marcus started teaching me. He showed me how to read a bank statement. He explained what equity was. He taught me about amortization schedules and the danger of variable interest rates. He gave me the tools to understand exactly how precarious my parents' financial situation actually was, despite the new cars and the catering van. I saw the cracks before anyone else did. I saw the late notices piled under the phone book. I heard the hushed arguments about credit limits, but I also saw the denial. Whenever I tried to bring it up, to suggest we cut back, my mother would wave a hand dismissively. You worry too much. Savannah, you are so gloomy. We are fine. We are the Blakes. We always land on our feet. But I knew the truth. I knew that in the Blake household, there was an unwritten constitution, ratified by years of silence and compliance. Article 1. Caroline's feelings are the center of the universe. If she feels successful, we are successful, regardless of the bank balance. Article 2. Logan's wants are actually needs. His happiness is the barometer for the family's health. Article 3. Savannah is the safety net. Savannah is the buffer. Savannah is the empty space where they can dump their responsibilities, their expectations, and their indifference. I was the one who was strong. I was the one who could take it. As I drove closer to Cedar Harbor, the memory of that realization burned in my chest. I had accepted my role for so long. I had played the part of the responsible, low-maintenance daughter perfectly. I had made myself small so there would be more room for Logan. But as the exit sign for the lake house flashed past on the highway, I realized something else. Uncle Marcus had been right about the paper, but he had been wrong about one thing. I wasn't just learning to speak the language of paper to protect myself. I was learning it so that one day, when they inevitably tried to rewrite history, I could hold up the page and force them to read the truth. That day, it seemed, had finally arrived. It was 4 years after I had moved out, on a humid weekend in mid-July, when I found the bomb sitting beneath the oven. I had driven back to Cedar Harbor for a quick visit, intending to stay only one night before returning to my apartment in Maple Ridge. The plan was simple. Have dinner, listen to my mother talk about her latest high-profile catering gig, nod politely at my father, and leave before the suffocation of my childhood home set in. I was in the kitchen, trying to be helpful, my mother, Caroline, was in the living room holding court with a neighbor, laughing loudly about a wedding planner she had outsmarted. I was looking for the large roasting pan to help with dinner. I knew she used to keep it in the bottom drawer of the stove. That awkward, narrow space usually reserved for cookie sheets and forgotten kitchenware. I gripped the handle and pulled. It stuck. I pulled harder, jiggling it to the left. It gave way with a scraping sound, but not because of a metal pan. It was jammed with paper. I frowned and crouched down. It wasn't just a few loose receipts or user manuals. The drawer was packed solid with white envelopes. I reached in and pulled out a handful. The paper felt heavy, high quality, the kind that conveys bad news before you even read the text. In the upper left corner of every single envelope, printed in aggressive, blood-red ink, was the logo, Tri-State Federal. My stomach dropped. I knew that logo. That was the bank that held the mortgage on the house. I looked at the postmarks. The one on top was from 3 days ago. The one beneath it was from 2 weeks ago. I dug deeper, shoveling the envelopes out onto the linoleum floor. April, March, February, January. There were dozens of them. Some were unopened. Others had been ripped open and then shoved back into the darkness, as if hiding them would make the words inside disappear. The noise from the living room, my mother's laughter, the neighbors' chatter, seemed to fade into a dull buzz. The air in the kitchen grew thin. I grabbed the stack, my hands trembling, and walked quickly up the stairs to my old bedroom. I shut the door and locked it. I sat on the bed, the duvet cover still the same faded floral pattern from high school, and began to open them. The language of financial ruin is specific. It does not mince words. Second notice of default, acceleration warning, intent to foreclose. I laid them out on the bedspread like a tarot reading of disaster. I pulled out my laptop and started a spreadsheet, my fingers flying over the keys. I needed to see the damage in black and white. They had not paid the mortgage in 7 months, months. The fees were accumulating like a cancer, late fees, inspection fees, legal fees. The interest was compounding. The total amount required to bring the loan current was staggering. It was not just a few $100s. It was thousands, tens of thousands. If they did not pay the full arrears by the end of the month, the bank was going to auction the house. I sat there, staring at the number on my screen. This house, the one my mother paraded as a symbol of her success, the one Logan bragged about to his college friends, was essentially gone. It was a corpse walking. The bank just hadn't buried it yet. I heard footsteps on the stairs. I shoved the papers under my pillow just as the handle turned. It was locked. "Savannah, dinner is almost ready," my mother called out cheerfully. I opened the door. She was standing there in her apron, smiling. She looked so unbothered. It was terrifying. "Mom," I said, my voice tight. "I found the drawer." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flickered, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch. "What drawer?" "The oven drawer," I said. "The one full of letters from Tri-State Federal." She waved a hand, dismissing me as if I were a fly buzzing around her hors d'oeuvres. "Oh, that. Don't worry about it. It is just a mix-up. The bank made an error with the escrow account last year, and now their system is sending automated junk mail. I am handling it." "Mom," I stepped into the hallway, blocking her path. "I opened them. These aren't errors. You are 7 months behind. They are going to foreclose in 3 weeks." Her expression hardened. The mask of the happy homemaker slipped, revealing the steel beneath. "You had no right to snoop through my things. Savannah, that is private family business." "I am family," I snapped, "and we are about to be homeless. How can you say you are handling it? Where is the money?" "Business is just a little slow this quarter," she said, her voice turning icy. "It is a cash flow issue, nothing more. I have a big contract coming up in September. It will cover everything. These banks just like to use scare tactics. They send those letters to frighten people. I have been negotiating with them. It is fine." "September?" I whispered. "Mom, the auction date is set for August 4th. "Stop being dramatic," she said, turning her back on me. "Wash your hands. We are having roast chicken." She walked down the stairs, her head held high, leaving me standing there with the weight of the roof collapsing on my shoulders. I went to find my father. He was in the backyard, raking leaves that didn't need raking. It was his way of looking busy to avoid being recruited for household tasks. The sun was setting, casting long, melancholy shadows across the lawn. "Dad," I said softly. He jumped, startled. "Oh, hey, sweetie." "Dad, did you know the house is in foreclosure?" He stopped raking. He didn't look at me. He looked at the oak tree. He looked at the fence. He looked anywhere but my eyes. "Your mother," he started, then cleared his throat. "Your mother handles the bills. You know that. She said she had a plan." "Dad, she hasn't paid the mortgage since Christmas," I said. "Did you know that?" He slumped. In that moment, he looked 20 years older. I knew things were tight. She asked me not to worry about it. She said she didn't want to stress me out while I was dealing with the arthritis in my hands. I thought she was taking care of it. "There is no plan, Dad," I said. "The only plan is an auction." He looked at me then, his eyes wet and frightened. "We can't lose the house. Savannah, where would we go? Your brother, he comes home from college in the summer. This is his home. His home, even in the face of ruin. The first person he worried about was Logan." I walked away from him because if I stayed, I would have screamed. I went back to my room and locked the door again. I pulled the papers back out. I opened my laptop. I logged into my own bank account. I was 24 years of age. I had been working like a dog since graduation. I lived in a studio apartment the size of a shoebox. I drove a car that rattled when it hit 40 miles per hour. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner 3 times a week. I had saved every penny I could, building a nest egg that was supposed to be my ticket to a master's degree in data science. It was my escape velocity. I did the math. If I emptied my savings account, if I liquidated the small investment fund I had started, if I cut my living expenses to the absolute bone, no eating out, no new clothes, canceling my gym membership, maybe even taking a second job on weekends, I could do it. I could bring the loan current. I could stop the foreclosure. And if I took over the monthly payments, I could keep the house afloat. But the cost was my freedom. It meant postponing grad school indefinitely. It meant staying in that cramped studio apartment for at least another 5 years. It meant anchoring my financial future to a sinking ship captained by 2 people who refused to admit there was even a leak. I sat there in the dark, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the decision. If I did nothing, the house would be gone in 3 weeks. My parents would be on the street. Logan would have nowhere to come back to. The illusion of the Blake family would shatter. I hated the illusion, but I loved the house. And despite everything, God help me, I loved them. I couldn't watch them drown. I picked up my phone and dialed the one number that mattered. "Uncle Marcus," I said when he answered. "Savannah." His voice was rough, sounding like he had just woken up or had a drink. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I found the letters. They are losing the house. 7 months behind." There was a long silence on the other end. "I figured it was coming," he said finally. "Caroline asked to borrow $5,000 last month. Said it was for a new oven for the business. I told her no." "I can save it," I said, my voice trembling. "I have the money saved for grad school. I can pay the arrears. I can take over the payments." "Savannah," Marcus said, his tone sharp, "do not do that. That is your future." "I can't let them lose it. Marcus, Dad looked like a beaten dog." Marcus sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "Listen to me closely. If you are going to do this, if you are going to throw yourself on this grenade for them, you need to be smart. You are not giving them money. You are buying the debt. Do you understand the difference?" "I think so." "Do not just write a check and hand it to Caroline," Marcus commanded. "She will spin it into a story where she saved the day. You call the bank. You talk to the loss mitigation department. You make the payments directly. And Savannah?" "Yeah?" "You keep a record of every single cent, every phone call, every confirmation number, because right now, you are the savior. But people resent the person who saves them, because every time they look at you, they are reminded of their own failure. Record everything properly. Don't just pay it and let them tell the story later. I will, I promised. I hung up. The next morning, I did not eat breakfast with them. I waited until Monday morning, back in Maple Ridge, to make the call. I sat in my cubicle, my heart hammering against my ribs. I dialed the number on the red logoed envelope. Tri-State Federal, Loss Mitigation Department, a bored voice answered. My name is Savannah Blake, I said, my voice steadying as the data analyst in me took over. I am calling regarding the mortgage on 42 Elmwood Drive. I have the account number, and I am authorized to make a payment. It took 2 hours. It took 3 transfers. It involved a level of groveling to a loan officer that made my skin crawl. But by noon, I had wire transferred nearly every dollar to my name to a bank that didn't care who I was. I stared at my account balance. It was almost zero. My master's degree was gone. My safety net was gone. I sent a text to my mother. The bank is handled. The arrears are paid. I set up a payment plan. I will be paying the mortgage from now on. We need to talk about how this works. She replied 3 hours later. Thanks. Honey, I knew it would work out. We are so relieved. Let's talk later. I am swamped with the Johnson catering order. Love you. No mention of the money, no mention of the sacrifice, just a breezy acceptance, as if I had simply picked up a gallon of milk on my way home. I put my phone down and looked at the spreadsheet on my screen. I created a new tab. I named it The House Project. And then I typed the first entry. Date, July 15th. Amount, $24,342. Description, arrears payment. To the outside world, I was Savannah Blake, a rising star at Northbridge Metrics. I had been promoted to senior analyst. I had a corner cubicle with a view of the city skyline. I wore tailored blazers and spoke with authority in meetings about fiscal projections and market volatility. My colleagues assumed I lived a life that matched my salary. They imagined I had a condo in the trendy arts district, a membership at an upscale gym, and a passport stamped with European vacations. The reality was a one-bedroom apartment in a complex that had not been renovated since the 1990s. The carpet was a depressing shade of beige that smelled perpetually of dust. The radiator clanked like a dying engine all winter. My view was a brick wall and a dumpster that was emptied at 4 a.m. every Tuesday. I lived there not because I was frugal by nature, but because on the first of every month, $2,400 left my account and vanished into the void of the Cedar Harbor mortgage. It was a bleeding wound that never scabbed over. I remember a Tuesday evening in November, 2 years into this arrangement. My friend Jessica, who worked in marketing, cornered me in the break room. She was glowing, holding up her phone to show me pictures of a villa in Tuscany. Savannah, you have to come, she said, her eyes wide with excitement. It is a group trip, 4 of us. We split the villa, cook our own meals, drink wine on the terrace. It will only be about $3,000 each for the whole 10 days. You work harder than anyone I know. You need this. I looked at the photos. The golden light hitting the Italian cypress trees looked like heaven. I wanted to go so badly it physically hurt. I had the salary for it. On paper, I could afford Italy 3 times over. I can't, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was made of plaster. I have some family commitments. The timing is bad. Jessica frowned, her enthusiasm dimming. You always have commitments. Sav, you haven't taken a real vacation since college. What are you saving for? A castle? I could not tell her that I was saving for a roof that did not cover my own head. I could not tell her that my castle was a house in Ohio where my mother was currently hosting a potluck, likely boasting about her catering business while I ate instant noodles to balance my budget. I'd just like to be prepared, I said. So they went to Italy. I stayed in Maple Ridge and worked overtime to build up a buffer fund in case the property taxes went up. That was the pattern. I declined bridesmaids' trips. I skipped the expensive dinners for colleagues' birthdays. I led a relationship with a kind. architectural engineer named David Wither and I because I could never explain why I panicked over the bill at a steakhouse. He thought I was cheap. He thought I didn't trust him. The truth was, I was terrified that if I bought a $50 steak, I might be $50 short when the water heater in Cedar Harbor inevitably broke. And it did break, and the furnace needed repairs, and the roof developed a leak. Every time, the call would come. "Savannah," my dad would say, his voice apologetic, "the guy says it is going to be $800. "Put him on the phone," I would say, and I would pay it. But the cruelest part was not the money, it was the emails. Every month, when the automatic payment cleared, Tri-State Federal sent a confirmation email. It would pop up on my phone screen, a bright little ping of success. Subject: Payment received. Body: Dear Michael and Caroline Blake, thank you for your payment of $2,400. Your loan is current. My name was nowhere. I was the ghost in the machine. I was the invisible engine keeping the ship moving, while the passengers on the deck toasted the captain. This erasure extended from the digital world into the physical one. I went home for Thanksgiving that third year. The house looked beautiful. The shutters were freshly painted, paid for by my bonus check. The landscaping was pristine, paid for by my overtime. We sat around the dining table, the same table where I had been denied field trip money years ago. My mother was at the head, flushed with wine and attention. My aunt and uncle from the next town over were there, along with a few neighbors. "The market has been so tough," Mrs. Gable, the neighbor, was saying, shaking her head. "The Robinsons down the street just got foreclosed on. It is heartbreaking. How have you two managed to hold on to this place with the economy like this?" I stopped chewing. My fork hovered over my plate. I waited. This was the moment. This was where she would say, "We couldn't have done it without Savannah." She stepped up. Caroline Blake smiled. It was a serene, beatific smile. She took a sip of her wine and leaned forward. "It hasn't been easy," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper that commanded the room's attention. "I have had to work like a dog. Harborline Events has really taken off. Thank goodness. But the hours are grueling. I have poured everything I have into this house. There were months where I didn't know if we would make it. But I told Michael, I will not let this family lose their home." I fought the bank tooth and nail. "She is a warrior," Logan chimed in. He was 21 then, home on break, wearing a brand new university hoodie. He raised his glass to her. "Mom is the reason we are all sitting here." "To Caroline," my father mumbled, raising his glass. He didn't look at me. I sat there, frozen, the food in my mouth turned to ash. I looked at my mother, receiving the accolades, her face glowing with the stolen valor of my sacrifice. She believed it. That was the terrifying part. She had told the lie so many times that in her mind, it had become the truth. She had edited me out of the narrative completely. I placed my fork down. The clink against the china was sharp, but no one noticed. "Mom," I said. "Yes, honey?" She looked at me, her eyes bright and vacant of any guilt. "The mortgage," I started. I didn't know what I was going to say. Maybe I was going to scream. "Oh, don't bore everyone with numbers. Savannah." She cut me off with a laugh, waving her hand. Savannah is always so obsessed with the technical details. She gets that from Marcus. Anyway, as I was saying, we are thinking of redoing the patio next spring. I closed my mouth. I looked at Logan. He was smiling at her, completely oblivious. He didn't know, or maybe he chose not to know. It didn't matter. The result was the same. A few months later, the injustice shifted from emotional to tangible. I drove home for Easter in my sedan. It was 7 years of age now. The air conditioning only worked if you drove faster than 60 miles per hour, and the passenger door stuck if it rained. When I pulled into the driveway, there was a truck parked there. It was a Ford F-150, not new, but recent, shiny black paint, oversized tires. It looked aggressive and expensive. "Whose truck?" I asked my dad as I walked into the garage. "Oh, that is Logan's," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Logan bought a truck?" I asked. surprised. I thought he was still looking for a part-time job near campus. Well, we helped him out, Dad said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. He needed a safe vehicle. The winter roads are bad up there. We co-signed the loan, and we are making the payments until he gets on his feet. I felt the blood drain from my face. You are making the payments? It is not that much, Dad said quickly, and he is just a kid. Savannah, he needs to enjoy his youth. We didn't want him driving a junker. I looked at my sedan in the driveway, the junker that I drove so I could pay their mortgage. I drive a junker, Dad, I said quietly. That is different, he said. You are established. You can handle it. Logan needs a little help. I walked into the kitchen where my mother was making coffee. I was shaking. You bought him a truck, I said. It wasn't a question. We financed a truck, she corrected, not looking up from the coffee pot. He needs it for his image. He is rushing a fraternity. He can't show up in a bicycle. I cut my coffee budget to instant granules this month, I said, my voice trembling. I turned down a promotion celebration dinner because I wanted to put extra toward the principal on the house. And you are buying him a truck? Stop counting pennies. Savannah, she snapped, turning around. You are always keeping score. It is unattractive. We do what we can for each of you. We gave you independence. We are giving Logan support. It balances out. Independence? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. You gave me a bill. Mom, that is what you gave me. And you should be proud to help your family, she said, closing the subject. Now, do you want coffee or not? I drank the coffee. It was bitter. That night, before I drove back to my lonely apartment, I tried one last time to find a foothold in the slippery slope of their logic. We were standing on the porch. The sun was setting, casting that golden light over the lawn that I was paying to maintain. Mom, I said, looking out at the street. I need to know something. I have put nearly $150,000 into this house so far, plus the arrears. Okay, she said, looking bored. And? If something happens, I said, if you and Dad ever decide to move, or downsize, what happens to the house? What is the plan? She looked at me as if I had asked her to explain quantum physics in Mandarin. It is the family house, Savannah, she said. I know, I said, but I am paying for it. Does that mean, is it going to be mine one day? Or do I get my equity back? Her expression changed. It went from bored to offended. She looked at me with genuine disappointment. This is not a business transaction, she said coldly. This is our home. Why are you always trying to own things? You do not own your parents. You do not own this house just because you help out. This house belongs to the family. It is for all of us. It is a legacy. But I am the only one funding the legacy, I said. Don't be selfish, she said. It is ugly. She went inside and let the screen door slam shut between us. I stood there on the porch of the house I was saving, listening to the crickets start their evening chorus. I looked at the new truck in the driveway. I thought about my empty savings account. I thought about the master's degree I didn't have. And I realized something that chilled me more than the evening wind. I wasn't an investor. I wasn't even a daughter. I was a battery. They were draining me to keep their lights on. And the moment I was empty, they would discard me. But batteries have a finite lifespan. And unlike a battery, I had a memory. And thanks to Uncle Marcus, I had a paper trail. I walked to my car, got in, and drove back to Maple Ridge. I didn't cry on the drive home. I just turned up the radio and let the noise drown out the realization that I was slowly, methodically being erased from my own life. I continued to pay. I continued to receive the emails thanking Michael and Caroline, but the feeling inside me changed. It wasn't duty anymore. It was something darker. It was the cold, patient accumulation of evidence. I was no longer saving the house for them. I was buying the evidence of their betrayal, one monthly installment at a time. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, about 6 months after I had taken over the mortgage payments. When Uncle Marcus called me, he did not call to check on the weather or ask about work. He said, Meet me at the Daily Grind on Main Street. 2 o'clock. Do not be late. I took a half day off work, driving through a downpour that turned the highway into a gray blur. When I arrived at the small cafe in Cedar Harbor, Marcus was already there. He was sitting in a booth in the back, away from the windows, nursing a black coffee. On the table in front of him sat a thick manila envelope. I slid into the booth opposite him, shaking the rain off my umbrella. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Did the bank call again?" Marcus looked at me over the rim of his cup. His eyes were dark and serious. "The bank is fine because you are paying them, but you are not fine, Savannah." "I am managing," I said defensively. "My budget is tight, but—" "I am not talking about your budget," he interrupted. He tapped the envelope with a heavy finger. "I am talking about your exposure. You are pouring concrete into a foundation that does not belong to you. If Caroline decides to sell tomorrow, or if Michael gets sued, or if they just decide they don't like the look of your face anymore, you are out. You have zero legal standing." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "They are my parents, Marcus. They wouldn't just throw me out." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Caroline let you pay for your own field trips while she bought Logan designer shoes. Do not confuse biology with loyalty." He opened the envelope and slid a document across the table. The header read, "The Blake Family Protection Trust." "What is this?" I asked. "I called in a favor with an old friend of mine, a trust attorney named Elliot Granger." Marcus explained. "We drafted this. Ideally, we would put you on the deed, but Caroline would never agree to that. It would bruise her ego too much to admit she doesn't own the house outright. So, this is the back door." I scanned the document. It was dense with legalese, clauses about beneficiaries, trustees, and revocable rights. "Look at Article 4, Section B." Marcus pointed to a paragraph on the third page. I read it slowly. "In the event of financial distress, where a third party assumes responsibility for the primary mortgage obligations to prevent foreclosure, said third party shall retain ultimate decision-making authority regarding the disposition, sale, or transfer of the property until such obligations are reimbursed in full." "In plain English?" I asked. "It means," Marcus said, leaning in, "that as long as you are paying the mortgage to stop the bank from taking the house, you hold the steering wheel. They can live there. They can paint the walls. But they cannot sell it, transfer it, or gift it without your permission." I stared at the words. It felt aggressive. It felt like a betrayal of the unwritten family code of blind trust. "Mom will never sign this." "She will," Marcus said calmly, "because I am going to tell her that without this trust, Tri-State Federal is preparing to accelerate the foreclosure process again due to instability of ownership. It is a bluff, mostly, but she doesn't know that. I will tell her this trust protects the house from her creditors, which is true, but it also protects the house from her whims." We went to the house an hour later. The meeting was held at the dining room table. Marcus had brought a notary, a woman named Linda who looked like she had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. My mother sat at the head of the table, looking annoyed. She was wearing her business face, the one she used when a client complained about the catering menu. My father sat next to her, looking anxious. "I don't understand why we need more paperwork," Caroline complained, flipping through the pages dismissively. "Savannah is handling the payments. We are a family. We don't need lawyers involved." "It is for your protection, Caroline," Marcus said smoothly. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on her. "The bank is nervous. They see the history of missed payments. They want assurance that the asset is ring-fenced. This trust puts the house in a protective bubble. If someone tries to sue Harborline Events, they can't touch the house. It is a safety net." My mother's ears perked up at the mention of protecting her business assets. "Oh, well, that makes sense." "And Savannah has to be named as the trustee for the financial clause," Marcus added casually, as if it were a minor footnote. "Since the payments are coming from her account, federal regulations require her signature on the oversight. It is just compliance." Fine, Caroline waved her hand. "As long as it keeps the bank off my back, I am tired of their letters. She didn't read Article 4. She didn't read Section B. She just wanted the problem to go away so she could go back to pretending it didn't exist. She grabbed the pen and signed her name with a flourish. Caroline Blake. My father signed next, Michael Blake. He hesitated for a second, looking at the document, then at me. Does this change anything? He asked quietly. Only if you stop paying, Marcus said. Otherwise, it is just insurance. Dad nodded and signed. Then it was my turn. I took the pen. My hand was trembling. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was the vibration of a paradigm shift. For 5 years, no, for my whole life, I had been the one begging for a seat at the table. I had been the one waiting for scraps of approval. By signing this, I wasn't just paying a bill. I was taking ownership of the table. I signed Savannah Blake. Linda, the notary, stamped the document with a heavy, satisfying thud. It was done. The house was now legally bound to the person who was actually keeping it standing. Logan was home that weekend, sprawled on the couch in the living room, watching a game. He wandered into the dining room as Linda was packing up her bag. "What is going on?" he asked, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "Are we selling the house?" "No, honey," Mom said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "Just some boring financial housekeeping. Uncle Marcus is being paranoid about the bank, as usual, but I handled it." "Cool," Logan said, taking a bite of the apple. "Hey, Mom, are we still good for the ski trip deposit? The guys need the money by Friday." "I will transfer it tonight," she said, beaming at him. I looked at Marcus. He was putting the original copy of the trust into his briefcase. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. As we walked out to his car, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone. "You keep a copy," Marcus said, handing me a folder. "I will keep the original in my safe, and I will file the abstract with the county clerk tomorrow morning." "Do you think they realized what they just signed?" I asked, clutching the folder to my chest. "No," Marcus said. "People like Caroline and Michael only see what they want to see. They see a solution to their immediate discomfort. They don't look down the road." He opened his car door, then paused and looked at me over the roof of the sedan. His expression was grim, almost sad. "Savannah," he said, "I hope you never have to use this. I hope they wake up. I hope they pay you back and thank you. But if they don't—" He trailed off, looking back at the house where my mother was now probably writing a check for Logan's ski trip, using the money she didn't have to spend on a mortgage. "If they don't," he continued, "this piece of paper is the only thing standing between you and being a doormat for the rest of your life. One day, when the roles switch, this trust will be the only friend you have in that room." "I know," I said. "Don't lose it," he said. "And don't talk about it. Let it sleep. Let them forget it exists. The best trap is the one the prey forgets is there." He drove away, leaving me standing in the driveway. The years that followed were deceptive in their calmness. The crisis of the foreclosure faded into memory. The letters from Tri-State Federal stopped coming to the house and started coming to my email, where I dealt with them silently and efficiently. The house remained standing. The grass was cut. The paint was touched up. To the outside observer, the Blake family had weathered the storm. My mother's narrative solidified into legend. At Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas parties, she would recount the dark days with the flair of a war veteran. "It was touch and go," she would tell my cousins, holding a glass of Chardonnay. "The bank was relentless, but you know me, I dug my heels in. I worked triple shifts. I told Michael, we are not losing this legacy, and we didn't." I would sit there, chewing my turkey, listening to her erase me. I never corrected her. I never stood up and said, "Actually, I paid $28,000 last year." I just sat there. But every time she told the lie, I would go home to my apartment, open my safe, and look at the trust. I would look at the monthly bank statements I had printed out and stapled together. The trust sat in Marcus's safe, gathering dust but losing none of its potency. It was a dormant virus in the family computer system. Logan graduated from college, finally, after 6 years. He moved back home temporarily to find himself. He redecorated the basement. He bought a purebred dog that he eventually got bored of walking, leaving my dad to clean up after it. He lived in the house as if it were his birthright, never asking how the lights stayed on or why the sheriff never came to put a padlock on the door. He would sometimes clap me on the back when I visited. "You work too hard. Sav," he would say. "You need to chill. Come hang out at the lake house with us this summer. Mom is paying." Mom is paying. The phrase made me want to laugh hysterically. Mom wasn't paying for anything. I was paying for the roof so Mom could pay for the lake house rental. But I smiled. "Maybe next time, Logan. I have deadlines." I retreated further into my work. I became colder, harder. I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped waiting for the thank you. I realized that the thank you was never coming. The trust was my secret. It was the only thing that made the unfairness bearable. I knew that no matter how much they ignored me, no matter how much they pampered Logan, the legal reality of their world was held in my hands. They were tenants in their own lives, and I was the landlord they didn't know they had. So when the call finally came, the call about the graduation party, the call about gifting the house, I wasn't just a hurt daughter. I was a trustee with a loaded gun. Uncle Marcus had told me to let the trust sleep. And I had. For 5 long years, I let it sleep. But as I drove toward the lake house, feeling the phantom weight of that document in my memory, I knew the time for sleeping was over. It was time to wake the monster up. The gravel crunched beneath the tires of my sedan as I pulled into the driveway of the rental property at Silver Pines Lake. It was Friday evening. 3 days before the graduation party, I had been explicitly uninvited from. This was the informal family cookout, a tradition of the Blake extended clan, and technically, no one had told me I could not come to this. I parked between a Lexus and a minivan, gripping the steering wheel for a moment to steady my breathing. I had told my mother I was just stopping by on my way to a conference to drop off a salad and say hello. It was a lie. I was here to perform a reconnaissance mission. The air smelled of charcoal smoke, sweet barbecue sauce, and the pine needles that carpeted the ground. From the backyard, I could hear the familiar, boisterous roar of my family. It sounded like happiness. To anyone else, it was the sound of summer. To me, it sounded like a frequency I could no longer tune into. I grabbed the folder from the passenger seat. Not a salad, but a thick beige file containing 5 years of bank transfers, and tucked it into my oversized tote bag. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the noise. The backyard was a scene from a lifestyle magazine. My mother had outdone herself. There were string lights draped between the trees, checkered tablecloths on the picnic tables, and a cooler filled with expensive craft beer. My brother, Logan, was standing near the grill, holding a spatula in one hand and a beer in the other, surrounded by 3 of our male cousins. "Man, you are going to be living the life," I heard my cousin Tyler say, slapping Logan on the back. "A whole house to yourself? No rent? That is the dream, bro." "Yeah, well," Logan said, flipping a burger with a practiced, arrogant flick of the wrist. "I have big plans for the place. Going to tear down that old fence, maybe put in a hot tub on the back deck. It is going to be the ultimate bachelor pad." I stopped walking. I stood in the shadow of the cabin, feeling a cold numbness spread through my chest. Bachelor pad. He was talking about tearing down the fence I had paid to repair 2 years ago after a windstorm. He was talking about installing a hot tub with money he didn't have, on a deck whose structural integrity I had preserved with a $3,000 infusion last autumn. I forced my legs to move. I stepped into the sunlight. "Savannah," Aunt Patty saw me first, waving a plastic fork. "I thought you were busy with work. So glad you could make it." "Just passing through, Aunt Patty," I lied, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack the enamel of my teeth. "Wanted to see the graduate." I made the rounds. I hugged people. I nodded at their questions about my job. I accepted a warm soda. It was a surreal performance. Everyone treated me with the same casual warmth they always had. completely unaware that I had been excised from the family portrait like a tumor. Then I saw my mother. Caroline Blake was standing in the center of the patio, holding a glass of wine, commanding the attention of my father's two sisters and the neighbors from Cedar Harbor who had driven up for the weekend. "It was a fight, let me tell you," she was saying, her voice pitching up for dramatic effect. "The bank wanted to take it all. They were ruthless. But I looked that loan officer in the eye and said, 'You are not taking my children's home.' I worked double shifts. I catered weddings with the flu. I did what I had to do." "You are incredible, Caroline," Mrs. Gable sighed, shaking her head in admiration. "Most people would have given up." "Well," my mother said, casting a modest look downward that was pure theater, "I wanted Logan to have a legacy. That house represents our family's resilience. And now, handing the keys to him, it feels like I can finally breathe. It is the perfect graduation gift." I stood on the edge of the grass, gripping the strap of my bag. I felt like I was watching a movie where the villain was rewriting the script in real time. She wasn't just lying. She was building a monument to herself on the foundation of my stolen money. "Savannah." The whisper came from behind me. I jumped, turning around. It was my cousin Jenna Hale. She was Uncle Marcus's daughter. Though she had grown up mostly with her mother after the divorce, she was quiet, sharp, and worked as a clerk in the county recorder's office. We rarely spoke, but we had always shared a silent understanding of the family madness. "Jenna," I said, "you startled me." She didn't smile. She grabbed my elbow and steered me away from the patio, toward the edge of the woods, where the noise of the party faded into a dull murmur. "We need to talk," she said, her voice low and urgent. "I saw something at work yesterday." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "The deed," Jenna said, looking back to make sure no one was listening. "Your mom came into the office on Thursday morning. She came in with a notary. She tried to file a quitclaim deed to transfer the title of the Cedar Harbor house to Logan." I felt the blood drain from my face. They hadn't just planned it. They had tried to execute it. They had tried to sign away my investment before the party even started. "Did she do it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Jenna shook her head. "No, the system flagged it immediately. There is a restriction on the title. A title defect warning popped up. It said the property is held within the Blake Family Protection Trust and cannot be transferred without the authorization of the primary financial trustee." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The trust, the piece of paper Uncle Marcus had forced them to sign 5 years ago, the one my mother had signed without reading because she was too busy protecting her ego. "She was furious," Jenna whispered. "She started yelling at my supervisor, saying it was her house and she could do what she wanted. They had to ask her to lower her voice. She left in a huff, saying she would call her lawyer. But Savannah, the trustee name on the block was yours." Jenna looked at me with wide, intelligent eyes. "Why is your name on a block against your parents' house? What is going on?" I looked back at the party. I saw Logan laughing, acting out a baseball swing with a hot dog bun. I saw my mother accepting a toast, glowing with the praise of her fictitious sacrifice. They had tried to cut me out. They had walked into a government office and tried to steal $680,000 of my life, and the only reason they failed was because of a legal landmine I had buried 5 years ago. "It is complicated, Jenna," I said, "but thank you. You have no idea how important that is." "She is going to try again," Jenna warned. "She thinks it is a clerical error. She told my supervisor she is going to fix it by Monday." "She won't be able to fix it," I said, my voice hardening, "because it is not an error." I turned away from Jenna and scanned the perimeter of the party. I needed to find him. I saw him sitting alone on a bench down by the water, away from the chaos. Uncle Marcus. He was wearing a fishing hat and looking out at the lake, a bottle of beer untouched beside him. He looked like a man waiting for a storm. I didn't hesitate. I didn't look back at the grill or the smiling faces or the lies being toasted in plastic cups. I walked across the lawn. The grass was soft under my shoes, but my steps felt heavy, like I was marching into battle. As I got closer, Marcus turned his head. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just watched me approach. He saw the way I was walking. He saw the tightness in my jaw. He saw the heavy tote bag on my shoulder. I stopped in front of the bench. The sounds of the party were distant now, replaced by the gentle lapping of the lake water against the dock. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. It was thick. It held the spreadsheet of every payment. It held the copies of the checks. It held the emails. And on top, it held a copy of the trust agreement. I placed the folder on the wooden bench between us. The sound of it hitting the wood was a dull thud, heavier than paper should sound. Marcus looked down at the folder, then up at me. His eyes were sad, but resigned. "Jenna told me," I said. "She tried to transfer the title yesterday." Marcus nodded slowly. "I figured she would. Caroline never waits." "She thinks it is a glitch," I said. "She thinks she can just yell at someone and make it go away." "She is about to learn that the law does not care how loud she yells," Marcus said. I looked back up the hill toward the house. My mother was laughing again, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the evening air. "I am done, Marcus," I said. "I am done being the ghost. I am done paying for the stage she stands on." Marcus picked up his beer and took a slow sip. "You know what happens next. Savannah, once you pull this trigger, you cannot unpull it. The family will break." "The family is already broken," I said. "I am just the only one who has the receipt for the pieces." Marcus set the beer down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his reading glasses, sliding them onto his nose. He tapped the folder I had placed on the bench. "Then let's make sure they read the fine print," he said. "Is it time?" I asked. "Is it time to let the paper speak?" Marcus looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Yes," he said, "it is time." I looked at the folder. Inside those pages lay the demolition of my mother's myth and the end of my brother's free ride. It was going to be ugly. It was going to be painful. But as I stood there by the water, listening to the hollow celebration of a theft in progress, I knew I had no other choice. I put my hand on the folder. "Monday morning?" "No," Marcus said, standing up and brushing the dust off his trousers. "Sunday, the graduation party. If they want to make a public spectacle of gifting the house, we should make a public spectacle of who actually owns it." I nodded. The die was cast. The storm I had been holding back for 5 years was finally about to make landfall. After leaving the cookout, I did not drive back to Maple Ridge. My hands on the steering wheel seemed to have a mind of their own, guiding the car away from the highway and down the familiar, winding roads that led to Cedar Harbor. I needed to see it. I needed to stand in the physical space of my betrayal and see if the walls would hum with the truth of what I had done for them. I pulled into the driveway of 42 Elmwood Drive. The house was dark, save for the porch light that cast a yellow artificial glow on the white siding I had paid to power wash last spring. My parents' car was not there. They were likely still at the lake house, soaking up the adulation of their relatives. But the Ford F-150, the truck my mother had co-signed for, sat aggressively in the center of the driveway. I walked up the concrete path. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of dread and anger. I reached into my purse and pulled out my key ring. It was the same key I had carried since I was 16 years of age. The brass was worn smooth by my thumb. I slid the key into the deadbolt. It went in halfway and stopped. I frowned and jiggled it. I tried to pull it back and push it forward. It hit a hard, metallic wall. I stepped back and looked closer at the lock. It was new. The brass was shiny, unmarred by scratches. It was a different brand. They had changed the locks. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not a sudden decision made over a graduation toast. You do not change the locks on a whim. This was calculated. They had called a locksmith. They had paid someone to come here, unscrew the hardware that I had paid to protect, and install a barrier specifically designed to keep me out. They had done this days, maybe weeks ago, while I was still transferring my paycheck into their account. I pounded on the door. It was not a polite knock. It was the fist of a landlord who had been locked out of her own property. "Logan!" I shouted. "Open the door!" A moment later, the porch light flickered. I heard the heavy thud of footsteps. The lock turned from the inside, the smooth, easy click of new machinery, and the door swung open. Logan stood there. He was wearing a university t-shirt and gym shorts. He looked flushed, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw me, but beneath the surprise, there was something else, a flicker of smugness, a defensive crouch. "Savannah," he said, blocking the doorway with his body, "what are you doing here? Mom said you were going back to the city." "My key doesn't work," I said, my voice trembling with a cold rage. "Why doesn't my key work, Logan?" He shifted his weight, looking past me at the empty street. "Oh, yeah. Mom said we had to upgrade security. You know, with me moving in and everything. We are in a transition period. She said anyone who comes over needs to call ahead now." "Anyone?" I repeated. "I am your sister. I am the reason this door is even here to be locked." "Chill out," Logan said, crossing his arms. "It is just a lock. Don't make it a federal case." I looked past his shoulder, into the hallway. The house smelled of cardboard and packing tape. Stacked against the wall were boxes, fresh and crisp, labeled in marker. Logan's room, man cave, trophies. On the entryway table, where my mother used to keep a bowl of potpourri, there was a large poster board. It was a vision board. I saw magazine cutouts of leather sectionals, a pool table, and a large flat-screen television. There were paint swatches taped to it, dark blues and grays. "You are remodeling," I said, staring at the board. "I am just making it my own," Logan said, following my gaze. "Mom said I could. She said the house needs a younger vibe. We are going to knock out that wall between the kitchen and the dining room to open up the flow." He was talking about knocking down a load-bearing wall in a house I had saved from foreclosure. "Is Mom here?" I asked. "We just got back from the lake to grab some more beer," Logan said. As if summoned, my father appeared in the hallway behind Logan. Michael Blake looked smaller than usual. He was wearing his World's Best Dad t-shirt, a gift from me 3 years ago, which now felt like a cruel joke. He saw me and stopped, his eyes darting to the floor. He could not look at me. He stayed back in the shadows, a silent accomplice. Then Caroline appeared. She walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she saw me standing on the porch, her expression did not soften. It tightened. She walked up behind Logan, placing a hand on his shoulder like a general reinforcing the front line. "Savannah," she said. Her tone was not welcoming. It was the tone one uses with a door-to-door solicitor. "I told you on the phone that it was best if you didn't come around this weekend. Today isn't convenient." "You changed the locks," I said. "You changed them before you even told me you were giving him the house." "We needed to secure the property for Logan," she said smoothly. "He has expensive equipment, computers. We couldn't just have old keys floating around." "Old keys?" I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Mom, I pay the mortgage. That key is the only reason you still have a door to lock." "Lower your voice," she hissed, glancing at the neighbors' houses. "You are making a scene. This is exactly why I didn't want you at the party. You are hysterical." "I am hysterical?" I stepped closer, forcing Logan to take a half step back. "I just watched you accept praise from the entire family for saving this house. I watched you lie to everyone. Are you going to tell anyone the truth? Are you going to tell Logan who actually paid for the roof over his head?" Caroline straightened her spine. She looked at me with a terrifying coldness. "The house belongs to your father and me. The name on the deed is Blake. We decide who lives here. You helped out. Yes, and we appreciate it. But that was your contribution to the family. It does not buy you ownership. It does not buy you the right to dictate our lives." "I paid $150,000, I said, enunciating every syllable. "That is not helping out. That is buying the house." "It was rent," she said dismissively. "Consider it back rent for raising you, for paying for your braces, for feeding you for 18 years. I felt the air leave my lungs. "You are charging me for my childhood?" while you hand him a house for free? Logan needs a foundation, she snapped, losing her composure for a split second. He is just starting out. You have a career. You are fine. Why are you so greedy? Why can't you just be happy that your brother is getting a good start? That is how a family operates. The strong help the weak. I am not strong because you raised me to be, I said, tears pricking my eyes. Not from sadness, but from the sheer frustration of screaming at a wall. I am strong because you abandoned me to figure it out alone, and now you are punishing me for it. Logan stepped forward then, his face flushed with indignation. He didn't hear the logic. He only heard that I was attacking his prize. God, you are so selfish, he spat. You always make everything about you. Look at me. Look how hard I work. Did you ever think that maybe Mom and Dad just wanted to do something nice for me? For once? Why can't you just let me have this day? Why do you have to ruin everything? I looked at him. I looked at the brother I had bought Christmas presents for when money was tight. The brother whose truck I was technically paying for right now because Mom had skipped the last 2 payments on the co-signed loan. He truly believed he was the victim. He truly believed I was the villain trying to snatch his graduation present. I looked at my father, hovering in the dark hallway, refusing to step into the light to defend me. I looked at the vision board with its plans to destroy the walls I had paid for. And finally, I looked at the new lock. You are right, I said softly. The anger drained out of my voice, replaced by a deadly calm. I have been making it about me. I have been thinking that if I paid enough, if I sacrificed enough, you would finally see me. But you don't see me. You just see a wallet. Oh, stop being dramatic, Caroline scoffed, turning back toward the kitchen. Go home, Savannah. We will talk next week when you have calmed down. And don't you dare come to the party on Sunday. I won't come to celebrate, I said. Caroline didn't hear me. She had already walked away. Logan glared at me one last time, then grabbed the door handle. Bye, Savannah, he said, and he slammed the door in my face. I heard the distinct, heavy click of the deadbolt sliding home. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the wood grain. I was locked out. I was erased. I was unwanted. But as I turned and walked back to my car, the tears did not fall. The humiliation that had burned in my chest on the drive over had cooled into something solid and hard. It felt like steel. They thought they had locked me out. They didn't realize they had just locked themselves in with a lie that was about to collapse. I drove back to Maple Ridge in silence. I did not turn on the radio. I needed the quiet to formulate the next steps. When I arrived at my apartment, it was late. The streetlights buzzed overhead. My apartment was small, and the furniture was cheap. But as I unlocked the door, my key turning smoothly, I realized it was the only place in the world that was truly mine. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on my sofa, staring at the wall. A knock came at the door. It was 3 sharp raps, precise, authoritative. I opened it. Uncle Marcus stood there. He was wearing a trench coat against the night chill, and he held a leather briefcase in his hand. He looked at my face, saw the red rims of my eyes and the set of my jaw, and he nodded. He didn't ask what happened. He knew. He walked in and placed the briefcase on my coffee table. He sat down and adjusted his glasses, peering at me over the rims. You went to the house, he stated. They changed the locks, I said. Logan is already planning renovations. Mom told me my payments were just back rent for my childhood. Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. Classic Caroline. She rationalizes the theft so well she almost believes it is charity. He clicked the latches of the briefcase open. The sound was loud in the quiet room. He reached in and pulled out a single document. It was the original trust agreement. The paper yellowed slightly at the edges after 5 years, but the blue ink of the signatures was as vibrant as the day it was signed. He laid it on the table between us. It looked innocuous, just paper and ink, but we both knew it was a demolition order. She thinks she has written the ending, Marcus said, his voice low and gravelly. She thinks she has cast you out, locked the door, and given the kingdom to the prince. She thinks the story is over. He pushed the document toward me. But ink lasts longer than memories, Savannah, he said. She forgot about this. She forgot that 5 years ago. She signed away her right to be the hero. I looked at the signatures, Caroline Blake, Michael Blake, and then, firmly, unmistakably, Savannah Blake. It is time to rewrite the story, Marcus said. Are you ready to hold the pen? I reached out and placed my hand on the document. The paper felt cool under my fingers. I am ready, I said. Good, Marcus said, closing his briefcase. Get some sleep. You are going to need your strength. Sunday is going to be a very long day for the Blake family. Saturday morning broke with a gray, oppressive sky, matching the concrete mood in my chest. At 9 o'clock sharp, Uncle Marcus and I walked into the offices of Granger and Lose. It was not a high-rise firm with glass walls and espresso machines. It was a small brick building on a side street in Cedar Harbor. Sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a bakery, the interior smelled of old paper, mahogany polish, and the serious business of other people's problems. Elliot Granger was waiting for us. He was a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of stillness that made you feel like fidgeting was a crime. He did not offer small talk. He gestured for us to sit in the leather chairs opposite his desk, which was already covered with the documents Marcus had provided. I sat down, clutching my purse. I felt like I was in the principal's office, about to confess to a crime I hadn't committed. Elliot picked up the trust agreement. He adjusted his glasses and ran a finger down the page. The room was silent except for the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. I drafted this 5 years ago, Elliot said, his voice dry and precise. I remember your mother. She was very concerned with how the trust would look to her friends. She was less concerned with what it actually did. He flipped the page and picked up the stack of bank statements and emails I had printed out. He spent a long time looking at the transfer highlighted in yellow from last month. $2,400 to Tri-State Federal. He looked at the email from the bank thanking Michael and Caroline Blake. Finally, he looked at me. You have been meticulous, Ms. Blake, he said. Most people in family arrangements rely on verbal agreements. They trust blood. You trusted ink. He picked up a red pen and circled a paragraph in the trust document. This is the kill switch, he said, turning the paper so I could see it. Article 4, Section B. We call this a contingent control clause. It states that any party who assumes the financial liability of the mortgage to prevent foreclosure, that is you, retains ultimate executive authority regarding the disposition of the asset until the debt is repaid to them. He leaned back, clasping his hands. In plain English, Elliot continued, your mother cannot give that house to your brother. She cannot sell it. She cannot refinance it. She technically cannot even paint the shutters a different color without your written consent. She is the title holder in name, but you are the title holder in power. She tried to transfer it on Thursday, I said, my voice barely a whisper. The county recorder stopped her. Because the trust is filed against the deed. Elliot nodded. It acted exactly as a lien would, but that won't stop her for long. If she is desperate or arrogant, she might try to petition the court to dissolve the trust, claiming you coerced her or that the terms were vague. She might try to forge a release. She wouldn't forge, I started to say, then stopped. I remembered the changed locks. I remembered the lies at the party. Actually, I don't know what she wouldn't do. Exactly, Elliot said, which is why we need to strike first, and we need to strike hard. He opened a file on his desk. I propose 3 immediate actions. First, we file for a temporary restraining order against the transfer of the property. This freezes the asset completely. No one moves in. No one moves out. No ownership changes hands. Second, we send a formal notice to the county recorder's office reaffirming the trust's standing. Third, I draft a cease and desist letter to Caroline and Michael Blake, informing them that any attempt to alter the property or transfer residency to Logan Blake constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty and will result in immediate litigation. I felt cold. Litigation. Restraining orders. These were words you used against enemies, not the people who raised you. I don't know, I said, looking down at my hands. I don't want to destroy the family. Mr. Granger, I just want them to acknowledge me. I want them to stop stealing from me. Elliot looked at me over his glasses. His expression didn't soften, but it became intent. Ms. Blake, he said, they changed the locks on you. They took your money for 5 years and then tried to erase your name from the history of that house. You are not destroying the family. They have already done that. The only question remaining is whether you are going to let them bury you in the rubble or if you are going to climb out. I looked at Marcus. He gave me a slow, grim nod. He is right, Savannah, Marcus said. You aren't starting a war. You are just fighting back in the one they declared on you years ago. I took a deep breath. The image of Logan's vision board flashed in my mind. The wall he wanted to knock down. The wall I had paid for. Okay, I said. File the papers. Elliot nodded and made a note. Good. Now, Marcus mentioned there is a secondary liability. A vehicle? The truck, Marcus said. The Ford F-150. I groaned. I co-signed for it 3 years ago. Logan had no credit history. Mom swore she would make the payments until he got a job. But looking at the statements, she has missed the last 2, Elliot finished, looking at a credit report he had pulled. And she was late on 3 others this year. Your credit score has dropped 40 points because of this. 40 points? I felt sick. I hadn't checked my score in months. I had been too focused on the mortgage. Here is the situation, Elliot said, tapping the desk. Since you are a co-signer, you are fully liable. The lender does not care about your family drama. They just want their money. However, the loan has a clause regarding the security of the collateral. If the primary borrower is in default and the co-signer formally withdraws intent to cure that default, the lender accelerates the repossession process to cut their losses. You want me to tell them to take the truck? I asked. I want you to stop shielding them, Elliot corrected. We will send a letter to the lender today. We will inform them that there is a dispute regarding the asset, that you will not be making any further payments to cover the shortfall, and that the vehicle is currently located at 42 Elmwood Drive. We will effectively invite them to recover their property. Logan loves that truck, I whispered. It is his identity. It is a stolen identity, Marcus said sharply. He is driving a $60,000 vehicle on your credit rating while laughing at you for driving a beater. It ends today, Savannah. I thought about my car, the one with the sticking door, the one I drove through rain and snow while Logan drove his pristine, massive truck to parties I wasn't invited to. Do it, I said. My voice was stronger this time. Draft the letter. Elliot pushed a stack of documents across the mahogany desk. I need your signatures. This authorizes me to act on your behalf. This is the affidavit for the injunction, and this is the notification to the auto lender. I picked up the pen. My hand shook, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a cornered animal finally turning to bite. I signed my name, Savannah Blake. I signed it again and again. With every stroke of the pen, I felt a tether snapping, the tether of guilt, the tether of obligation, the tether of hoping that if I just gave a little more, they would finally love me enough to stop taking. Elliot gathered the papers and organized them into neat piles. I will have a process server deliver the copies to your parents on Monday morning, but given the timing of the party— No, I said, standing up. Monday is too late. The party is tomorrow. They are going to announce the gift tomorrow. If we wait until Monday, Logan will already be moving in. I looked at Marcus. You said we should let the paper speak, I said. I want them to be served tomorrow, during the party. Elliot paused. A rare, dry smile touched the corner of his lips. That is highly aggressive, Ms. Blake. They told me not to come because I would ruin the mood, I said. I think a process server fits that description perfectly. I can arrange for a special Sunday service, Elliot said. It will cost extra. I don't care, I said. Add it to the bill. We walked out of the office into the gray light of the late morning. I felt lighter, as if I had shed a heavy coat I had been wearing for a decade. The dread was gone. replaced by a cold, sharp anticipation. Marcus stopped by his car and turned to me. He adjusted his hat, looking at me with a mixture of respect and sorrow. "You did good, kid," he said. "I feel like I just put a hit out on my own family," I admitted, wrapping my arms around myself. "They think you are weak, Savannah," Marcus said. "They think you are the girl who sits in the corner and writes checks and says thank you for the privilege of being used. They are banking on your silence. They have built their entire future on the assumption that you will never stand up." He opened his car door and looked back at me, his eyes hard behind his glasses. "They think that trust is just a stack of paper they signed to shut me up 5 years ago," he said. "In 3 days, they are going to learn that it is not paper, it is a mirror, and for the first time in their lives, they are going to have to look at themselves." He got in the car. "Go home, Savannah," he said through the open window. "Get your suit ready. Tomorrow, we go to a graduation." I watched him drive away. Then I got into my own car. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't call my mother. I drove back to Maple Ridge, went to my closet, and pulled out my best suit. It was navy blue, sharp, and professional. It was the suit I wore when I had to deliver bad news to underperforming clients. It was perfect. Sunday morning dawned with a sky so blue it felt like an insult. It was the kind of day designed for barbecues, graduation photos, and the seamless performance of the American suburban dream. As I steered my car down Elmwood Drive, the air conditioning blasting against the heat of my skin, I felt like an arsonist arriving to watch the fire I had set days ago. The street was already lined with cars. My mother had invited everyone. There were cousins from 3 towns over, neighbors who had known us since we were in diapers, and a few of Logan's college friends who looked hungover and out of place in their blazers. I did not park in the driveway. I parked 4 houses down, tucking my sedan behind an oversized SUV. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. Through the windshield, I could see the spectacle. The house, my house, was festooned with decorations. A massive banner hung across the porch railing. "Congratulations, Logan. The future is yours." Hundreds of gold and black balloons bobbed in the gentle breeze, tethered to the mailbox, the fence, and the new lock on the front door. Music was thumping from the backyard, a generic, upbeat playlist that signaled forced celebration. But as I watched, the picture began to fracture. Parked directly in front of the house, blocking the path to the party, were 2 vehicles that did not belong. One was a white sedan with the seal of the county sheriff's civil division on the door. The other was a dark, nondescript car that I recognized immediately as belonging to the process server Elliot Granger had hired. 2 men in cheap suits stood on the walkway, holding thick manila folders. They looked bored, checking their watches, indifferent to the festive atmosphere they were interrupting. And then, turning the corner at the end of the block, came the hammer. It was a heavy-duty tow truck, its diesel engine growling low and menacing. Cutting through the sound of the pop music, it moved slowly, like a shark navigating a reef, until it stopped directly in front of the driveway. The driver, a burly man in a neon vest, didn't hesitate. He began backing up toward the Ford F-150 that sat proudly in the center of the driveway. The truck was decorated, too. Someone had tied tin cans to the bumper and written Class of 20 in window paint on the back glass. I saw Mrs. Reeves from across the street step out onto her porch. She was holding a watering can, but she wasn't watering anything. She was watching. Her husband joined her a second later. Down the block, I saw 2 of my teenage cousins stop playing catch. They pulled out their phones. The cameras went up. It was time. I opened my car door and stepped out. The click of my heels on the pavement was sharp and deliberate. I walked toward the house, but I stayed back, hovering near the edge of the property line, flanked by the oak trees. Elliot Granger and Uncle Marcus stepped out from behind a parked van where they had been waiting. They fell into step beside me without a word. We were a grim phalanx in dark suits, walking into a carnival. At the front door, the process server rang the bell. The door swung open. My mother appeared. She was wearing a cream-colored dress that looked expensive, her hair perfectly coiffed. She held a glass of champagne in one hand and was wearing a smile so wide it looked painful. "Welcome. You must be—" Her voice died in her throat. Her eyes dropped to the badges on the belts of the men, then to the folders in their hands. "Caroline Blake?" the first officer asked. His voice carried clearly in the sudden silence of the front yard. "Yes," she said, her smile faltering, but not yet breaking. "Is there a problem? We are having a private party. We are serving you with an immediate injunction regarding the property at 42 Elmwood Drive," the officer said, thrusting the folder toward her, "and a notice of title dispute filed by the trustee." Caroline recoiled as if the paper were radioactive. "What? That is ridiculous. This is my house. I have the deed inside." "We also have a cease and desist order regarding any transfer of residency," the second man added. "Effective immediately. No new tenants are permitted to take possession of the premises until the legal standing of the Blake Family Protection Trust is resolved in court." "There is no trust," Caroline snapped, her voice rising, the veneer of the perfect hostess cracking. "That was just some paperwork we did years ago. It doesn't mean anything. I am the owner." "According to the county recorder and the active lien on the property, you are the resident, not the executor," the officer replied calmly. "The executive authority belongs to the financial trustee. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt." While she was staring at the papers, frozen in shock, the sound of metal grinding on metal erupted from the driveway. The tow truck driver had hooked the chain onto the rear axle of Logan's F-150. The hydraulic lift hissed, and the back of the massive truck began to rise into the air. The tin cans tied to the bumper jingled pathetically. Logan burst out of the house, pushing past our mother. He was holding a beer, his face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into panic. "Hey!" he screamed, running down the porch steps. "Hey, what are you doing? That is my truck. Put it down." The driver didn't even look at him. He continued to operate the levers. "Repo order!" the driver shouted over the engine noise. "Lender called it in. Default on payment and withdrawal of surety." "What?" Logan spun around, looking frantically at Caroline. "Mom, you said you paid it. You said you handled the insurance and the payments. You said I didn't have to worry about it until I got a job." Caroline looked from the process server to Logan, her face draining of color. The guests in the front yard had gone silent. The music seemed to have stopped, or maybe I just couldn't hear it over the rushing of blood in my ears. I was going to pay it next week," Caroline stammered, her voice shrill. "It is just a mix-up. Logan, tell him to stop." "He is taking my truck! Mom!" Logan yelled. He looked like a child whose toy was being snatched away. But the toy cost $60,000 and the audience was everyone he wanted to impress. "You promised. You said everything was taken care of." "It is a mistake," Caroline screamed at the driver. "My daughter co-signed that loan. She has great credit. You can't take it." "The co-signer is the one who authorized the surrender, ma'am," the driver said, securing the chains. "She sent the letter yesterday. Said she is done paying for it." Caroline froze. The words hit her like a physical slap. She turned her head slowly, scanning the street, her eyes wild and searching. That was when I stepped out from the shadow of the oak tree. I walked up the driveway, past the tow truck that was dragging my brother's ego away, past the neighbors who were whispering behind their hands. Elliot and Marcus walked slightly behind me, my silent enforcers. I stopped 10 feet from the porch. Caroline saw me. Her eyes widened, and for a second, I saw pure, unadulterated hatred. It wasn't the look of a mother. It was the look of a con artist who had been caught mid-grift. "Savannah," she shrieked. The sound tore through the neighborhood. "What have you done?" I stood still, my hands clasped in front of me. I felt incredibly calm. The shaking was gone. "I didn't do anything." "Mom," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the silence of the yard, it carried to the street. "I just stopped doing everything." You called them." She pointed a trembling finger at the tow truck, then at the officers. This is your brother's graduation. This is his day. How could you be so jealous? How could you be so petty? Logan looked at me, his face crumbling. Savannah, tell them to stop. Please, everyone is watching. I can't. Logan, I said, it is not my truck. I stopped paying for it, just like I stopped paying for the house you are trying to move into. A gasp went through the crowd. I saw Aunt Patty cover her mouth. I saw the Reeves neighbors lean over their porch railing to hear better. Liar, Caroline yelled, stepping down from the porch, brandishing the manila folder like a weapon. She is lying. She just helped out a little with rent. This is my house. Michael, tell them. Tell them it is our house. She turned to my father, who was standing in the doorway, looking like a man watching his life burn down. He looked at Caroline. He looked at Logan, who was near tears, and then he looked at me. He didn't speak. He just lowered his head and stepped back into the shadows of the hallway, disappearing from the fight. You have no right, Caroline hissed, advancing on me. You are ruining this family. You are humiliating us. The humiliation is yours, Caroline, Uncle Marcus said, stepping forward. His voice was deep and steady. Savannah paid $680,000 to keep this roof over your head. She has the receipts. She has the trust. And now, she has the authority. Shut up, Marcus, Caroline screamed. You always poisoned her against me. She turned back to the crowd, spreading her arms wide, trying to regain control of the narrative. Everyone, please, she shouted, her voice cracking. This is just a legal misunderstanding. My daughter is having a breakdown. She is confused. Please, just go into the backyard. The food is ready. We will sort this out. But nobody moved. The illusion was shattered. You cannot eat barbecue while a tow truck drags the guest of honor's car away. You cannot celebrate a graduation when the sheriff is serving an eviction warning to the hostess. Elliot Granger stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. Mrs. Blake, he said, his tone professional and cutting. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a foreclosure of authority. According to the trust you signed, Ms. Blake has invoked her right to control the asset due to your attempt to fraudulently transfer the title. You are not to move any furniture. You are not to alter the structure. And you are certainly not gifting this home to anyone. Caroline stood there, heaving, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She looked at the banner that said, "The future is yours." It flapped mockingly in the wind. She looked at me one last time. I will never forgive you for this. I looked her in the eye. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to apologize. I didn't feel the need to fix it. I know, I said, but for the first time, Mom, I don't care. The tow truck revved its engine and began to pull away, dragging Logan's truck down the street. The sound was the final punctuation mark on the sentence I had just delivered. The party was over. The reality had arrived. The silence that followed the departure of the tow truck was heavier than any noise I had ever heard. The engine's roar faded down the street, dragging my brother's $60,000 ego with it, leaving a vacuum in the front yard of 42 Elmwood Drive. The party was dead, but the guests remained. They stood in clusters on the manicured lawn, holding their paper plates and plastic cups, looking like statues in a diorama of a suburban disaster. They looked from the empty driveway to my mother, then to me, and finally to the man in the suit standing beside me. Elliot Granger did not waste the moment. He treated the front lawn like a courtroom and the stunned neighbors like a jury. He opened the folder he was holding with a sharp snap. For those confused by the presence of law enforcement, Elliot's voice projected clearly across the yard. Let us clarify the ownership of this property. 5 years ago, this house was 7 months in arrears. It was weeks away from a sheriff's auction. The bank was not negotiated with, as Mrs. Blake has claimed. The debt was purchased. He pulled out a document, the original trust agreement, and held it up. This is the Blake Family Protection Trust, he continued, signed by Michael and Caroline Blake. It explicitly states that in the event of financial rescue, the payer assumes executive control, and the payer was not Caroline Blake. Elliot reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of stapled papers. These were the copies I had made, the undeniable, mathematical history of my sacrifice. "Pass these around," Elliot said, handing the thick stack to Mrs. Reeves, the neighborhood gossip. Mrs. Reeves took them as if they were holy scripture. She looked at the top page. Her eyes went wide. She passed it to Aunt Patty. Aunt Patty looked at the numbers and gasped. $2,400 a month, Aunt Patty whispered, but in the silence, it sounded like a shout. "Savannah, you paid this every month since 2019? "Every month," I said, my voice steady. "Plus the insurance, plus the property taxes, plus the roof repair last autumn." The papers made their way through the crowd. I watched the realization ripple through my family. The myth of Caroline Blake, the indefatigable businesswoman who saved her family, was dissolving in their hands. "I didn't know," my cousin Tyler muttered, looking at me with a strange new respect. "Mom said you were just doing your own thing in the city." Caroline stood on the walkway, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. She looked at the neighbors reading the proof of her failure. She tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled croak. "This is ridiculous," she said, waving her hands frantically. "Savannah helped out. Yes, I never denied that. But I was the one managing the accounts. I was the one dealing with the stress. I bore the spiritual burden of this debt. Money is just numbers. I held the family together." "You held the lie together," I said. "And you used my money to buy the glue." Logan turned on me then. He was shaking, humiliated, stripped of his truck and his big graduation reveal in the span of 10 minutes. "Are you happy now?" he screamed, tears streaming down his face. "You humiliated mom. You stole my truck. You are ruining my life over a stupid house. Is that what you wanted? To be the winner?" I looked at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a profound, exhausting pity. "I am not ruining your life, Logan," I said slowly, making sure he heard every word. "I am just introducing you to it. For 25 years, you have lived in a fantasy where things just appear because you want them. The truck appeared, the tuition appeared, the house appeared. You never asked where they came from. You just took them." I took a step closer to him. "I am not destroying your future. I am just refusing to finance it any longer. The truck is gone because you didn't pay for it. The house is not yours because you didn't buy it. Those are not punishments. Those are consequences." "But Mom said," Logan started, pointing at her. "Mom lied." A deep voice cut through the air. We all turned. My father, Michael, had stepped out of the shadows of the hallway. He walked down the porch steps, moving stiffly, looking older than I had ever seen him. He stopped next to Caroline, but he did not touch her. He looked at the crowd of people, his friends, his family, and then he looked at me. "Michael, tell them," Caroline hissed, grabbing his arm. "Tell them this is our house." My father pulled his arm away. It was a small motion, but it was the most violent thing he had ever done to her. "We would have been on the street 5 years ago if not for Savannah," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a confession. "I knew. I signed the checks she sent. I saw the bank notices stop coming. I let her carry us. I let her pay for the roof, the food, the cars, and I let you all believe we did it." He looked at me, and his eyes filled with tears. "I sat there at Thanksgiving and listened to you brag, Caroline, and I saw Savannah's face, and I said nothing. That is my sin. I sacrificed my daughter to protect my wife's pride." A hush fell over the yard. Caroline looked at him, betrayed, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. She had lost her audience. She had lost her co-conspirator. Elliot Granger stepped forward again. He looked at his watch, then at me. "Ms. Blake," he said formally, "according to the trust, the executive authority is yours. The title dispute is active. The restraining order is in effect. But ultimately, as the financial controller, the disposition of the asset is your decision." He gestured to the house behind me, to the balloons, to the banner, to the parents standing on the concrete path. "What do you want to do?" Elliot asked. This was the moment. The power shifted so violently I could almost feel the air pressure change. Everyone was looking at me. Caroline looked terrified. Logan looked defeated. I could kick them out. I could tell Elliot to file the eviction notice tomorrow. I could sell the house, take my equity, and burn this bridge until nothing remained but ash. It would be just. It would be fair. I looked at the house. I looked at the porch where I used to read books. I looked at the window of my old room where I had counted my tips from the grocery store. Then I looked at my mother. She was trembling. She looked small. "Savannah," she whispered, "I am your mother. You can't throw me out. This is my home. You wouldn't do that. You are a good girl." "You are a good girl." The phrase she had used to manipulate me for decades. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of impending rain and dying barbecue charcoal. "I am not throwing you out," I said. Caroline let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. I knew you—" "Stop," I cut her off. My voice was like a whip crack. "I am not throwing you out today, but the rules have changed." I pointed to the house. "This house will not be gifted to Logan. That offer is rescinded immediately. Logan, you have 30 days to find your own apartment. You have a degree. Use it." Logan looked down at his shoes, nodding mutely. "As for you and Dad," I continued, turning to Caroline, "you can stay here for 6 months. That is the timeline. I will list the house for sale in January. That gives you half a year to find a condo, a rental, or something you can actually afford on your own income." "Sell it?" Caroline gasped. But the legacy." "There is no legacy." "Mom," I said, "there is only debt and deception. I am selling the house to recoup my investment. I will take what I put into it. Whatever is left over, if there is anything left after the second mortgage I know you secretly took out, you can keep, but the Bank of Savannah is closed. Permanently." I looked at Elliot. "Draft the agreement. 6 months occupancy. They pay the utilities. If they miss a utility bill, the timeline accelerates to 30 days. "Understood," Elliot said, making a note. "And Mom," I added, looking her dead in the eye, "if you try to tell anyone that you decided to downsize, or that this was your idea, I will publish the bank statements on social media. I will let everyone know exactly why you are moving. Do we understand each other?" Caroline looked at me. She looked for the girl she could bully. She looked for the daughter who craved her approval. She didn't find her. She found a landlord. "I understand," she whispered. The air seemed to go out of the afternoon. The party was not just over. It was erased. Guests started moving, awkwardly muttering excuses, walking to their cars. They avoided eye contact with Caroline. They nodded respectfully to me as they passed. Mrs. Reeves walked by, clutching the stack of bank statements. She handed them back to me. "You are a strong woman, Savannah," she said quietly. I had no idea. Within 20 minutes, the street was clearing. The balloons bobbed listlessly. The banner "Congratulations" Logan had come loose at one corner and was flapping sadly against the railing. I walked up the path. I passed my mother, who was sitting on the porch steps, staring at nothing. I passed my father, who was picking up red plastic cups from the lawn, trying to make himself useful in the wreckage. I walked up the stairs to the front door, the door with the new lock. I put my hand on the frame. The wood was warm from the sun. For 5 years, I had been fighting to get back into this house. I had fought to belong. I had fought to be seen. But as I stood there, looking into the hallway where Logan's vision board still sat, I realized I didn't want to go inside. I didn't want to live here. I didn't want their approval. I had won. I had taken back my power. And the most powerful thing I could do was to walk away and let them live in the reality I had forced them to acknowledge. I turned around. Uncle Marcus was standing by his car, smiling. It was a real smile this time. "Ready to go?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." I walked down the driveway, past the empty spot where the truck used to be, and got into my car. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at my mother. I put the car in drive and headed toward the highway. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I was tired. I was poorer than I should have been, but for the first time in my life, I was free. And that was worth every single penny. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you tuning in from the kitchen, your car, or maybe while at work? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing Savannah take back her power, please subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.